Hi everyone. I'm going to put out this idea of the smaller or less dramatic unlockings. So I have this nerdy satisfaction that comes from reading old Davanloo transcripts. The articles from the International Journal of Short-Term Dynamic Psychotherapy, the Green Book, the Yellow Book, it's all like hog heaven for me, right? And so I'm also part of a book club, by the way, where we review these cases, so that's giving me a lot of motivation. Anyway, lately I've pored over the case of the German architect and the man from Southampton. So a running theme in these transcripts, and not just these, but everything through the 80s basically, is that of Davanloo addressing the resistance, very doggedly until it's sufficiently neutralized, and then facilitating the experience of affect and impulse, which, by the way, is not always very dramatic. Like in one place, for example, with the man from Southampton, the patient says something to the effect of, "For Christ's sake, I just wish you'd leave me alone," right? Whereupon Davanloo decides that that was sufficient, that was enough affect and impulse, and then the dynamic exploration continues. So the affect seems almost secondary to getting to the links to the past, fresh memories, spontaneous memories, and then the psychodynamic understandings of the core patterns that form the undergird of the patient's difficulties, right? The core neurotic structure. So getting insight and understanding into all of that seems primary. And the emotional piece is important, but it seems like a step in that direction, a launching pad, so as to be able to really get into the unconscious, right, and get insight into all these patterns. And Davanloo refers to these experiences, even the ones that I just mentioned do not seem very dramatic at all, okay? He refers to them as an unlocking of the unconscious. And this is important because it corrects the idea that unlockings always have to be very dramatic and contain a lot of the firework displays. That is the case sometimes, especially when a patient is highly resistant and we have to really hammer on pressure on the defenses and all of that. And then the breakthroughs tend to be more dramatic and tend to have more fireworks. But I think it's a very, very important point here is that unlockings are not always that dramatic. Like, for example, I remember seeing a Davanloo case when I saw him in Montreal where the patient just moved their arm like that. And Davanloo said, that was the passing of the impulse. And it was not a lot of fanfare. It wasn't very dramatic at all. And then, that led to more affect and then more dynamic exploration and all of that. So I'm putting this out there in the hopes that that might correct an idea, a misconception, that unlockings always have to be very, very dramatic and grand. Sometimes that's not the case at all. Now, interestingly, but don't quote me on this, I believe that later in Davanloo's career, as he became more sophisticated with his taxonomy and his metapsychology, he started calling what I have been referring to today as a minor unlocking. And minor unlockings, that's what you want to aim for if you have some fragility on board, for example. Like you really don't want to get into a situation where you're moving towards like a major unlocking with a vertical approach. If you're dealing with lower capacity, right, you actually want to aim for a minor unlocking the way that you see with the man from Southampton, for example. Now, interestingly, the man from Southampton or the German architect, they're actually not fragile. They're highly resistant with some ego syntonicity in their defensive structure. And what I have found is that going for minor unlockings at a lower rise of feeling, the way we see in these transcripts, is actually a beautiful way of creating more ego dystonicity. And it really solidifies the conscious therapeutic alliance, and it also strengthens the unconscious therapeutic alliance. So, in a sense, this is a bit of a plug for seeing the value of those smaller unlockings. So this is where I wrap up for today, but this was fun for me, and I hope it was fun for you. I hope that there are other Davanloo lovers out there that enjoy going a little deeper and taking a look underneath the hood when it comes to Davanloo and his work.